Welcome to Small Town Snarks. I'm Joel.
And I'm Miranda. Let's get snarky.
Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Miranda?
No.
Okay, it's been a great episode, everybody.
We'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time on Small Town Snark. The time has come for us to discuss Godspell. Dun dun dun.
Part
one. Spoiler alert, people. There's two parts. Two productions, essentially. One and the same.
This show is cursed.
This show is cursed. There are very few shows, and listeners, you will know why in about the next 7 episodes. Between parts 1 and part 2. Why Godspell is one of the only shows that I will definitively say I don't ever need to do ever again.
Nope.
Ever again. I appreciate the show. I like the music in the show. I don't ever in my life, ever again, never again.
Nope, it's dead to me.
Yeah, I could probably, next several lifetimes, it just, we've got a lot to unpack.
Yeah,
We've
I don't
got
even
so
know
much
where to
to
start.
I do.
Okay, good.
I have a great place to start at the very beginning.
Very good place to start.
It is. Mm-hmm. So, Legally Blonde just ended.
It did.
And you were ready to get us to full seasons.
I was.
Now let's just, because it's going to be critical, and most people will know this, why it's critical when I'll say it. Let's just set a time frame for this. Legally Blonde was summer of 2019.
Correct.
Godspell really got going. Really, I think we were doing auditions, if my notes are correct, and they will be. We'll talk about that in a minute. But Godspell auditions were in December.
Yes.
Of 2019.
Yes.
So anyone who remembers what happens a couple of months down the road from December of 2019 probably knows where the story's going. But we'll leave that we'll save that for later.
Dun, dun,
Dun dun dun. All right. So Godspell. How did we pick Godspell? Do you remember?
So I talked to Eric about it a little bit, and we had been talking for a while about how it would be a good show for STS. Mainly, it's an ensemble show. It's fun. It's got, public appeal. A lot of people know about it. It appeals to an older audience as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were trying to branch out into more than one show a season,
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to do a smaller show to start, in addition to our summer show. So our summer show is supposed to be Mamma Mia.
Mm-hmm.
Which obviously bigger show. So we were like, we're going to do Godspell, smaller show, earlier in the year, and test the waters on how multiple shows a year would go.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we picked it. It was also, the original version was much cheaper than the musicals we would typically do through MTI.
Mm-hmm.
So the original version was probably half the price to get the rights for. So that was also really appealing. And we were trying to do it at a different venue, a smaller venue that would be more of an immersive, in-the-round experience.
Yes.
So there were a lot of factors that went into that, but this was definitely a show that we were basically testing how to grow.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember much about the initial discussions about Godspell and that selection. I had, honestly, I had seen the show before, and the songs are iconic. There are very few musicals that kind of break through the mold of just, beyond, it's beyond the knowledge of just theater people, but everybody knows the songs from Godspell.
Exactly.
You may not know all of them, but there's definitely several that you have heard. So, of course, I was familiar with it from that perspective, but the decision to do Godspell really intrigued me, and I think the immersion of it all really intrigued me. Like you said, we were using a new venue. We were in a church, kind of like a large hall of a church. We had this great concept of it being the show being in the round and kind of remaking this hall into this performance space, which was really exciting. But I guess the biggest thing and where things, where we kind of got our first red flag in this production, we held auditions like we would for our typical show in December, and we had a total of 2 people show up for in-person auditions for Godspell Part 1.
And we had 1 video.
And we had 1 video. So we had a total of 3 of a cast of, I believe, 12, if I remember correctly. That was something we had never experienced before in a series of many, many things that will go on with this production. But that was something we had never experienced before, not having the people that we needed to do a show.
Yeah, that was rough. That was definitely a rough moment. It was one of those moments where I was kind of questioning a lot of things, like, are we going to be able to grow? Are we going to be able to scale this? Are we going to be able to do more than 1 show a year? It was very discouraging that our numbers were that low. And I remember just being very, very stressed and thinking, well, it's so important that we make this show happen to establish ourselves as a company that does more than 1 show a year. Otherwise, this is going to continue to happen every time we try to branch out from our summer shows.
Yes.
And it was also difficult because we were auditioning in a different space. We honestly didn't really have that big of a presence in the community yet. We were kind of just the company that showed up once a year. So people weren't really prepared for us to start branching out into other time frames. But yeah, it was definitely a moment of, what do we do? This sucks. This is super stressful. We were planning on doing this show. Do we cancel the show? Do we move forward? What is that going to look like?
Yeah, so I think right there's a really good point for me to kind of just jump in with some personal things from this period, because that's going to help address kind of some of how we moved through that process to get to where we ended up. To be completely transparent, 2019 honestly, the entire year was just a really heinous time for me. Like, there was just a lot going on personally for me. There's a lot going on professionally for me. Well, honestly, there wasn't really much going on professionally for me, but I was kind of going through a lot and wasn't really happy with the work that I was doing. I wasn't really happy. Like, there were just things going on just in life. There was a lot going on during that time. And for me, one of the things that I was doing that was kind of helping me through all of that was I was taking notes, and I was just like trying to be very thoughtful about what I was doing and being very intentional about my time and how I was, what I was filling my time with ultimately. So one thing I will say about this show is that of all of the shows that I think we have ever done that I still have records for, I have the most amount of records for this show.
Wow.
I have upwards of 3 different notebooks filled with meeting notes, rehearsal notes, audition notes from Godspell Part 1 and Part 2.
Wow.
So that, preparing for this conversation today, I had a lot to reflect back on as far as that experience. And, to be completely transparent about the entire situation, and we'll talk about this more as we move through the Godspell process, but I had made the decision that post-Godspell I was going to be stepping away from the company. And looking back on my notes of things, this was just a really difficult thing for me to be seeing after coming off of such a success with Legally Blonde and having, such a great turnout of people. And, I felt like at that time I was ready to explore some other creative outlets. I was ready to explore just things professionally. I was ready to try other things. And For me, there was just so much going on that like keeping notes and like keeping track of things was just one way for me to have like control and agency over what I was doing and what I was working on. So, like I said, all of this stuff was very well documented at the time, and we're reflecting back on things in the way that I had remembered them from my perspective. So, back to the situation at hand. We had 2 people show up for in-person auditions, and we had a third person who was a video audition. I remember very vividly us having those conversations after rehearsal. After auditions. I remember us discussing what this meant. And one thing that I can say about you, Miranda, among many positive things that I can say about you, Miranda, is that there has never been, in all of the years that I've ever known you, an obstacle in a professional setting that you don't manage to come up with a solution for.
Yeah.
I definitely felt like all of us were completely blindsided by the fact that this was going to be the turnout.
Yes.
One thing I have, and that I've reviewed in my notes recently was I remember us having this audition process, and then there was a discussion about whether or not we should cancel the show.
Yep.
And I have a list of notes in my notebook of reasons why I thought we shouldn't cancel the show, which was a really kind of tough thing to look back on, especially considering at that point we had no idea what the next 4 months, let alone the next year and a half, was going to entail with the pandemic.
Yep.
But I could tell from that notes that from those notes that I was very personally invested in making sure that this show happened.
Yeah.
But I remember us kind of like having that moment of, okay, this is what we need to do. I knew you weren't ready to cancel because you knew what it meant to, in order for us to get to a full season, the show had to happen.
Yep.
I remember, just looking through my notes, I remember writing notes down of like other alternative ways that we could present the show if, people maybe they just couldn't commit their time to be there for an extended period of time. So like maybe we stage it in a concert format that's still immersive, but like people just have to learn their one song, but what would that process look like? So, we were definitely weighing all of our options at that point. And ultimately we came up with the decision of going through and trying to find people that had done shows with us previously that would be interested in coming back and playing some of these roles.
Yeah.
Which I'd love to talk about that process a bit more, because I know, like, looking at my notes, we had, like, essentially created a list of all of the characters and 3 or 4 people that we thought would be really excellent for those roles.
Yeah, so and this is a completely random thing, but I remember on that audition day, I was so stressed, and we ordered Chipotle, and I had accidentally ordered the wrong thing.
Oh, no.
And at that moment, it was like, my world is over. Everything's ending. It was just the cherry on top of everything.
Yeah.
And I remember in that moment when we were trying to come up with, okay, what are we going to do? And we had decided we were going to reach out to people. And we did have like 3 or 4 options for each role, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying to you, all right, like, start making phone calls. And you were kind of like, well, you're the director, you should be making the phone calls. And I just, like, snapped at you. I was like, oh, guess what? You're a co-director now, and you're going to make phone calls. And that was definitely not my finest moment. And that was, I mean, this is something I've, been working on for a long time. But for a while, especially when I was younger, when I would get stressed, I would just lash out and, like, say things I didn't mean. And that was one of those moments where it had never occurred to me that, being like a co-director is obviously a big deal. And at the time, I was just like, I literally need help and support. And like, if improving your title is going to get the help I need, then that's what we're going to do. And it was just definitely not my finest hour there. But yeah, that was definitely a moment where, like, tensions were so high and we were trying to figure out what to do, and it was just the beginning of what had ended up being a very like stressful process, especially for the two of us, and like for what our friendship looked like.
Yeah, and I mean, I can say from my standpoint that, I mean, I remember us having that conversation, and I think for me in that moment, I was like, I've never had to have those types of conversations, and I don't necessarily have to think that I was giving you the grace either of like realizing that you also had never had to have those types of conversations with people. So neither one of us really had the framework in mind. And on top of that, you know, I had mentioned, I think I was so set on like, there's another way that we can do this where we could do this like concert style and it would be less of an ask of people. And I just felt like at that point in time, you and I were on very different wavelengths of what the end result was going to be.
100%.
And for like the first time in several shows, we weren't like playing the same game. Like we were both playing board games, but you were playing Monopoly and I was playing Life. Like, you know, like we just were on two very different wavelengths of how to move forward with that.
Right.
And again, it was just a situation of we had never been in that circumstance before, and I referred to this in my notes that I prepared for today as like, it was like the plug and play method of like, okay, who can fit in this role? Okay, who can get in contact with this person? How do we have, you know, what options do we have? If this person is in this role, then they can't be in that role, which means we have to go with somebody else. But if they say no, then we have to go back to the other person. It was just a very overwhelming experience, I think, for all of us.
Yeah.
That ultimately, I mean, we found a cast.
We did. And I think, too, it's important to give ourselves grace in that respect because, you know, no matter what we were feeling while we were going through, what was said in those moments, like you said, neither one of us had been through that situation before. And we were doing the best we could with the resources we had at the time, but we were stressed. We didn't know how to handle it. We were just trying to figure it out.
Right. And,
you know, this idea of what is the solution going to be, and, you know, something I continue to work on is realizing I don't have to find a fix immediately for every situation. And I think that was one of those times where we would have really benefited from like taking a step back and like sleeping on it and thinking, you know, coming together the next day and brainstorming. But because the tensions were so high and it was such a stressful situation, my brain was like, we got to find a fix right now. And because of that, we didn't have those clarifying conversations that would have been really beneficial of, you know, weighing the pros and cons of different options, figuring out where each other were at. You know, we were just kind of like, need fix now. Let's figure out how to do it immediately.
And that, you know, sometimes, you know, I think we've gotten to a point now, and like we'll talk about, you know, like our working relationship and how that developed, and you know how we got to where we're at now, where things are, unless you're not telling me something, things are great now. But
oh, we need to talk.
Oh gosh. I feel like now we're much better about, and I think this comes with as you get older and you have more lived experiences, you get better at making those more rash decisions because you've been through it before and you have that, you know, experience to draw on when you're making those types of decisions. Where at that time, I just feel like we knew how to do a show, but we didn't know how to get the show going under those circumstances.
Yep.
And it's, you know, to this day, I'm like, if that ended up being the case again, I don't know how we would handle it, but I would feel more equipped for sure in this situation. And honestly, I mean, when I think about it now, there have been moments like that in recent shows. Not to that extreme in any way, shape, or form, but like we've been equipped to handle those types of auditions now. And, you know, we to this point have never had a show where we haven't been able to get a cast together. And that is not only telling of the hard work and the investment that we put in and the long and stressful days that we had at that point, you know, with this process with Godspell, but also the fact that we've been able to nurture and create like a company where people feel welcomed. And if we do need someone to step in at the last minute, we have people that are always willing to be a part of shows. And that says a lot.
Yeah, and just in general, our communication has gotten so much better. I mean, we talk almost every day,
right?
About life things, but also show things, coming up with plans, anticipating problems. And yeah, like you said, I think we're so much more equipped to not only deal with that situation again, but also just to deal with surprises.
Yes.
There's always something with any show that we are not anticipating, and we have to figure out a solution on the fly. And we're a lot better at doing that now.
Yes, for sure. I do want to talk about, so we have a cast. We managed to pull a cast together.
We sure did.
In that cast were a lot of really close ties. There were board members in the cast that we just asked to join in.
Yep.
Everyone who auditioned, the 3 people who auditioned, all were in the show, so no concerns there. But it truly was, there were a lot of close relationships, people that we were very close with. I will say one of my closest friends was in the cast, agreed to be in the show. Dakota was in the show. There were a lot of really close relationships in this show. Thanks to the willingness of those people to jump in to make sure that the show happened. And I think that was, a lot of those people hadn't acted before, or it had been a very long time since they had been on stage.
Right. And that definitely created more challenges between the two of us, I would say, because we were working with people we were close with, and with any show, there are concerns that come up with cast members.
Absolutely.
And, having those conversations, whether it be about, my boyfriend at the time or your friend or whomever, it was tough.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There were definitely, biases there on both of our sides, and trying to remain professional when more than half of the cast are people you're super close with, very, very difficult. So that also contributed to what ended up being a difficult time in our friendship.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a really excellent point that whenever you're working with family members or friends, it provides a whole nother host of expectations, and you really do want to be an advocate for that person, and you really do want to support those people. And it makes things, it can make things tricky. And we're working on a show right now where we all have family members in the show, and I feel like because of Godspell is going to get a very bad rap. I'm going to be just point blank at this point in the process. If you haven't already picked up on that through our conversations, the show's really going to get a bad rap. But
yes.
I think I'm having this moment, and this is a light bulb moment. We're going to start a brand new light bulb moments here on Small Town Snark. I genuinely, and I didn't think I'd be able to say this, and it kind of makes me a little bit emotional to say it, but thinking back on the show, there wasn't really these. It's hard to see the positives from this experience. Really, really hard to see the positives, because it just was a really difficult time. So thinking, having these moments now where we're thinking about those experiences of trying to work with friends and family members, and I think about all of that and all the work and everything that happened in those situations to where we're at now. And it's just a really beautiful thing that we can all have these associations, and we can have these relationships, and we can all do theater together and put on really incredible shows. And it's because of all of the work and all, even after all of the trying times and situations, we're in such a good space now. And we know how to handle those situations in a very understanding way for everybody. And that is a big moment.
Yeah. I think with literally any relationship, and, we've been friends for such a long time, there's going to be moments where you're not on the same page and things are difficult. And I do think that's one of the good things that came out of Godspell in particular is we know we can make it through those difficult things, and we know we can have those conversations. Absolutely. And we can disagree and, end up repairing our friendship and moving forward. And I think that was a big moment for us because we had never really had a conflict before, honestly. And, with any type of relationship, and, I would say this to people who are even just like married or dating as well. It's like that first big fight is really going to tell you, it's going to tell you a lot about your relationship. And I think for us, like having that moment, taking a step back, and then being able to realize like this is something we want to continue doing, and we want to be able to communicate better and put this behind us and move forward and create art together was a big deal. And because we went through that, we're able to tackle things a lot better now than we were at the time.
Yeah, it's just that experience, and as I mentioned at the beginning, 2019 was a really, really bad year, and like all of that weighing on me in combination with just the stressfulness of trying to cast the show and then trying to pick everything out, it just was really, it was just a lot. It was a really, really rough time, and like it's just nice to think about it now and for us to have this discussion and realize that there are, even in the most difficult times, silver linings. And there, you go through things like that and you realize where you're at with it now, and things are so positive right now with what we're doing. Even at the lowest of times when we're really struggling, we're really learning something new, and it's going to build us back up in the long run. And that is something that I'm really coming to terms with now, especially having this conversation. So
yeah, and we disagree all the time.
Yeah, we do.
But
all the time, constantly.
Yeah, constantly, every other day.
Yes.
But we have the tools now.
Yes.
To disagree in a way that is productive. So yeah, I mean that was a big thing. We, I also remember, I took a day trip with Dakota, and I think I was going to be out for like 2 days. And you messaged me because the 2 days I was out was the day that someone dropped the show.
Oh.
And I was like, of course, just it again, show cursed for sure.
Yep. Yeah. It's just been, it was just quite the experience, but I mean, let's take a jump back so we keep pushing through this story. So we have a cast.
We do.
We've kind of got two routes you want to go. You want to play a little game, Miranda?
Oh, I would love to play a game.
A or B? A or B. Which way would you like to go first? A or B?
B.
B. Okay. So we had a conversation, you and I, about the great thing about this text, Godspell, this beautifully written show. One of the nice things about Godspell is that I have never seen the same version of Godspell twice.
Yep.
There is so much potential to set the show anywhere you want, have a deeper conversation, elevate the material to associate it and give it some more structure to a greater story. You and I had many discussions about what we wanted that conversation to be and where we wanted to go with it. And ultimately we decided setting it around the conversation, or around September 11th. Which I, to this day, still think there was a lot of potential there. I think about the way that we ran with it, and, Godspell Part 2 aside, which we'll get there, but, like, Godspell Part 1, that conversation of you and I discussing what we wanted the concept to be was a really great experience for me. The concept itself aside, it was a really great experience for me, for you and I, to really discuss how we wanted to present this story and how we wanted to make it authentic and really engaging for our audience.
Yeah.
I had seen there was a revival of it in like 2012, something like that. that was very much so to the book, but it was a very like cartoony, like very animated version of this show. And I just felt like there was so much potential, and I thought for you and I to have that agency over the story to really just give it something else beyond what it is at face value.
Yep.
I think was really, really powerful.
I agree.
I think we'll save the full conversation of the concept till Godspell Part 2, if you're okay with that.
Yep.
I think we've got more to discuss on that topic, and it was more associated to Godspell Part 2, so we'll save that.
Yeah.
So if you would have gone with the A route, we would have jumped right into rehearsals.
All right, let's jump in.
Let's jump into rehearsals. So we are back for the final time, the Jesus Saves room. Jesus Saves room. One thing we were not equipped for or prepared for in any way, shape, or form, something we didn't even think about because we didn't have to think about it when we were doing just summer shows, was that space was not equipped to handle the elements or temperatures.
Yes.
I still have memories in my mind of those rehearsals, and every single person wearing the biggest winter coats they could, because the heat in that space did not work.
It was so cold. It was uncomfortably cold.
Yes.
And we plugged in a heater, just what we had.
Yep.
And before rehearsal, everyone would stand around the heater and try to warm up. And then we would go into rehearsal. I mean, it was so cold.
It was like to the point where it was almost a distraction. Like it just, you couldn't even, we were lifting things, but your hands were like freezing cold.
Yeah,
like,
people were wearing gloves.
Yes. So to those of you who are like, wow, we should really rehearse in other places, or, I remember seeing a comment about, we should have rehearsals outside again on one of our social media pages. Dealing with the elements sounds great in theory, but there's always a downside to it.
There sure is.
Always a downside to it, whether it be hot outside and bugs and all the other good stuff, or inside and it's freezing cold.
Yep.
Can never win.
No.
Can never win. That rehearsal process was quite the experience. We had designed for us a set. One of our performers had a family member that built the set for us. We did not get the set until almost the very end, but our concept for the set were, the show was going to be in the round. So we had 3 platforms.
Yep.
We, of course, had a cross. We had some projection going on. We were doing a little bit of projection. And that was about it. Am I really missing anything from this?
We were playing with some different light fixtures, fun light fixtures that we would put on. Because we weren't going to really have lighting because we were in a hall. So we were playing around with that. But yeah, that was the gist of it. It was very simple.
And I remember the challenges of, I had never directed a show in the round before. And I don't know about you up to that point. Nope. I mean, neither one of us had directed a show in the round, so we were really just going with what we thought would be the most accurate. I mean, we had seen shows in the round, but knowing that you can't have your back to the audience for too long, or you don't want to be at one side of the stage for a longer period of time than when you're on the other side of the stage. Like, there were just so many practical concepts and things that we were trying to make sure that we could implement throughout that process. And it was quite the learning curve, if I remember correctly. I mean, with the choreography and the blocking, we just had to be really, really intentional with that.
Yeah, it was actually really neat. I mean, we did some really cool things with staging it in the round. And I'm still proud of the choreo. I mean, there was a lot of really fun choreo in that show, some fun lifts. I mean, that was pretty cool. I do remember with the fact that we reached out to people, one of our selling points, we're reaching out to people, is we'll work around your schedule, you're busy, blah blah blah. And what ended up happening is there were a lot of rehearsals where there were just a few people there, and we were just trying to make it work. So it was definitely an uphill battle the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, I really loved the uniqueness of the choreography that we had. It was engaging, but it was challenging.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the things that I do respect is that, we definitely do encourage people to get out of their comfort zone and to really just give it a try. So I was impressed by that. But I agree with you when it comes to, working with people's schedules. We were really intentional about that. We had a brand new vocal director.
Yeah, we did.
And working with that individual was great. It just like the rehearsal process for the show. I remember having very, generally fond memories. I think just again with my just personal stuff going on, I was very tired. There was a lot going on at that period of time. But I remember having really successful rehearsals and getting through the material. I will say, and this is, we're getting probably around February at this point. We were rehearsing all of the numbers individually. We were having run-throughs with the entire cast. I do remember, so about 3 weeks before we went into tech, I went on vacation. Do you remember me going on vacation during that process? You probably blocked it out because it was a source of contention for the two of us.
Oh no! What happened?
So I had planned a family vacation, and this was planned like a year in advance, and it was to California.
Okay.
And I was gone for 10 days, 3 weeks before opening night.
Okay.
And I just remember the show, we weren't really where we wanted to be. We had to go and tour the venue. We went to tour the venue, and I think we were seeing that it was going to be a greater, we were going to have more needs and more things that we needed to create at the venue than what we had planned for.
Right.
There was just a lot of things stacking up in those last couple of weeks, and I just unfortunately had this trip planned for several months beforehand, and I had to go. I mean, it was all paid for. Everything was scheduled to go. So I just remember that being like a source of like, okay, great. We're not ready, but have a great vacation. We'll see you when you get back kind of energy between the two of us.
Yeah. Oh boy, I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay. That's okay. And like, like hindsight now, I mean, like, there's nothing could have been done, and like...
Right, I can guarantee that wasn't about you. It was just,
for sure.
Oh God, we're about to open, and
for sure,
my person is leaving for 10 days.
Yeah, and I just even thinking about it now, I'm like, I could never imagine, like, hey, we're a couple weeks from opening. See you when I get back.
Peace out.
I mean, and also in the midst of all of this, there was this like weird like murmuring starting in December into January of a virus going on that wasn't really a thing, and then it wasn't a thing that was affecting most people, and the United States hadn't been impacted by it much by that point, and I remember going on that trip, and while I was on that trip, cases started to appear.
Right.
So like I think this trip went from like February 28th to like March 7th or something like that. I don't know why those dates kind of stick out in my mind. It was like 10 days that I was gone. And cases of COVID-19 started popping up in California, and like it was one of those things, no one really had an idea as to what it was going to be or where it was going to go or what was going to happen with it. Before I get going with that conversation, did you have anything else from the rehearsal process? Because once we get on the COVID-19 train, Miranda.
I mean, I have just a couple things.
Sure.
The one being, there were kids in this space.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
And we found a note in the back that just said pee pee poo poo.
Oh, it wasn't just a note. It was art.
Oh, it was art.
It was art. Yes, there was artwork on it. Yeah.
Yeah, pee pee poo poo.
I want to say it was like just two stick figure people, and then it said pee pee poo poo across the top of it.
Yeah, and that, I want to forget that. That was...
I have to see if I still have that. Because I definitely had it in my possession at one point.
Because we need to put it up on a bulletin board here.
I have no idea where it would be.
Yeah, but it was very profound.
Mm-hmm.
Pee-pee poo-poo.
Profound?
It was. I just remember at one point, Brooks and I were driving home because I used to drive him to and from rehearsal and he was in the show. And at one point I kind of like, what are those things called on the side of the road that are like bumpy?
Oh, the like rumble strips.
I kind of
I think that's what they're called.
Went onto one a little bit and went back, and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He was like, "Yeah, I mean, that's about the third time you did that. I was going to wait until 3 times, and I was going to ask if you were okay." I was like,
good to know.
I guess I'm struggling right now.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, this was our first pig party.
Oh, the fact that it's not our last
is not our last, but
not
it was
anywhere
our
close
first.
to our last. No, we've got a couple of pig parties.
What song was this in?
Oh, the pig party. I'll figure it out. And we'll discuss it.
Yeah, we need to discuss the pig party.
Yeah, we'll discuss it more because it definitely comes back in Godspell Part 2.
Yeah. Pig parties, for those of you who don't know, are when actors pretend to be pigs and have a party.
And I don't know why that's a staple in more than one musical, but there definitely are. You know, honestly, it's funny you say that because the other show that I think of that has a pig party in it was Pippin.
Yeah.
And they're both have music written by Stephen Schwartz. Stephen Schwartz.
Apparently he just is giving pig party.
I guess. I don't know, but it's a weird coincidence that it happened twice.
Well, I think a pig party should take place in every show.
I struggle with the concept of where in some shows. Would you like to elaborate just a little bit more?
Pick a show.
I don't know if I want to. I mean, we just discussed Legally Blonde. Where would you like a pig party in Legally Blonde?
Great question. During the parade.
During Legally Blonde remix?
Pig party.
On their way back to court?
Mm-hmm. They just passed a pig party on the way.
Sure, of course. I love it. I love it. It's very profound, and I don't know what the message. Pee pee poo poo. It is.
Pee pee poo poo.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what that is though. Like, he just writes music for shows that have pig parties. I don't know. It can't be like a rule that he has, can it?
It's just the vibes, I guess.
There's no pig party in Wicked, to my knowledge.
I mean, not yet. We haven't directed Wicked yet.
Okay, great. Those of you listening, 2057, when the rights are finally available for Wicked, Small Town Stars.
I mean, I think there could be a pig party in the Emerald City.
Emerald Pigs?
Yes.
No, that's a concept. That is a concept. that is a take.
Now we've had good ideas, but that's a great idea.
I mean, it's canon at this point. There's got to be a pig party. We didn't decide on that. Stephen Schwartz did, but
Yep, it's out of our hands.
Yeah. So moving on from our pig parties, jumping back to my travels back from California.
Yep.
COVID-19 was becoming a thing.
It sure was.
It sure was. And I remember coming back, and at that point we were in run-throughs.
Yep.
And this will be the first reference to this, likely, because I don't remember. We may have talked about it in like Heather's or one of the other earlier shows, but I take very chaotic notes.
You sure do.
Very chaotic notes.
Any
person who's listening to this that has ever been in a show that I've directed or, has supported a show that I've directed knows. My note style is I see something happen. I want to make a note of it. I jot down 3 random words that somewhat relate to what's happening. And then I move on. Because when you're watching a show, you don't have much time to take a note. Mm-hmm. It's a great practice in theory. However, when you go to give those notes and you see 3 random words that you don't know what they mean, you're clueless.
Yep.
I have in my notebook from this time, usually when I take notes, I do like run through, date, notes.
Yep.
I have run through notes from March 12th, 2020, and I have run through notes from March 13th, 2020.
Oh boy.
After that, my next notes in that notebook were not until April.
Oh my gosh.
So I am speculating that our very final rehearsal prior to the pandemic was March 13th of 2020.
That tracks, yeah.
I don't remember, for some reason March 12th sticks out in my mind as like the day that the world shut down. So I don't know if there was like timing on that of like, okay, we're still able to have rehearsal and not everything was shut down. I don't remember the exact timing on that. Yeah. But I do remember prior to that final rehearsal, there was a porch out in front of the theater, or out in front of our venue, that we would sometimes take meetings on, like small group like check-ins, because it would separate us from the cast. Yep. And I remember standing out there it was you and me and Brooks, I think, was there. It was essentially the board members that were part of the show. Yeah. Dakota was there. And we essentially discussed what we were going to do.
Yeah.
And I can almost guarantee that this was a conversation going on for every theater company and any event or any activity that was coming up that had a large number of people.
Right, and I remember it was tough because we were so close, and we had never been, just like everyone else, we had never been through this type of event. Mm-hmm. We didn't know what was going to happen. We thought, maybe we'll go into quarantine for a few days, maybe a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. We just didn't know, and...
I would like to, sorry to interrupt, I would just like to add, because we haven't mentioned this, we were a week and a half away from opening. We were very 10 days away from opening. Tech was like literally the next week.
Yeah. So I do remember the 12th, we had that conversation, and I think right after that you actually figured out that the church was stopping activities. So that made our decision for us, because that was our venue. Mm-hmm. We went in, talked to our cast, and we were trying to come up with another day that we could, reconvene, and we were planning for a month and a half out. Mm-hmm. And I remember the 13th basically was we're going to get the set in, we're going to record our run through so you guys can practice at home, because we didn't know, what that was going to look like. Mm-hmm. And at that point, the president had just basically said, like, this is a state of an emergency. So the cast was all like, okay, we're going to do this one rehearsal, we're going to run it one time, and then we're not going to see each other again until we reconvene. Mm-hmm. And, unfortunately, of course, one person wasn't there for that final day. So otherwise we would have had, like, the full blocking. Mm-hmm. So it would have been easier for people to review. But, I remember people started getting nervous. They were like, I don't know if we can do this, and everyone was just like, we're going to do this final rehearsal, we're going to get our ducks in a row, and we're going to see what happens. But, it was unprecedented times. We didn't realize what it was going to be like. Mm-hmm. I do remember one of the best things, so we talked about our last episode, Karen. Mm-hmm. Karen's company had a show going on at this time. They were actually in performances, and they posted a picture on social media of two people in this show kissing. And the caption was, "We're not afraid of COVID. Come see X show tomorrow." And they ended up deleting it. But it was just, it just goes to show, like, no one knew what this was. Nope. And, in hindsight, that response was just so out of touch. But at the time, I was just like, we're trying to figure out, what are we going to do? How are we going to stop rehearsals? How are we going to keep people safe? And they took just a very different approach to that conversation. But I will never forget that. Just two people kissing. They're like, we're not afraid of COVID. Come out and see our show in a tiny venue with a bunch of people.
Yeah. It was such a confusing time, and such, unprecedented is not even, like, the right word to use. It just was completely just out of, like, left field. We didn't know. Nobody knew.
Nope.
we thought it was going to be 2 weeks and then we were going to be back at it.
Yep.
And little did we know that leaving the theater on March 13th, we wouldn't, or the theater, I'm sorry, leaving the rehearsal space on March 13th, we would not set foot back in that space for almost another year.
Yeah.
And that is really heavy to think about.
It was tough.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough.
But the good news is, I think we're going to leave today's episode here. The good news is the Godspell. Godspell keeps giving.
Oh, it sure does.
Giving and giving and giving.
We're not done with Godspell.
Oh, we're not even anywhere close to being done with Godspell. Godspell Part 1, we're not even close to being done with.
Yeah, and there are more pig parties to come.
There are more pig parties to come. There are virtual rehearsals, Zoom rehearsals to come. God. There are all sorts of different things to come in the Godspell saga. So stay tuned and stay buckled in.
Oh, yeah, because also we're going to move venues soon.
We are. Oh, yes.
Get ready.
It's hard to say that knowing that we're still a year away from that in the story, but there's a lot that happens in that year.
There sure is.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll take it day by day.
Day by day.
By day.
By day. By day. By day. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye-bye. And that's a wrap. Thanks for getting snarky with us. We'll see you later.
See you next time.